Hello, Ollie here, and in today's video we're going to talk about one of our past kings, King George IV, a king that had a few nicknames. Prinny, the King of Bling, the Prince of Wales, as in the mammal, not the country, because he got a bit Georgie Porgy, possibly, was written about this king, who is fascinating. It's an extraordinary story, the life of King George IV. But today we're going to focus on the story of his official marriage, not his unofficial marriage, not the legions of girlfriends he had during his reign. It's the marriage to Caroline of Brunswick, which really is the most extraordinary story. And it makes the turbulations in the current royal family seem a bit like the Waltons. King George IV ruled as Prince Regent for 9 years before becoming king, thanks to his father George III's mental illness, which saw him completely unable to rule. However, the prince was a constant thorn in the government's side. He was hopelessly addicted to spending, gambling and womanising. He'd caused a scandal by marrying Maria Fitzherbert in 1785. The union was legally invalid because it lacked the consent of George III and the fact that Maria was a Roman Catholic. And that was a big no-no at the time, being as we were a Protestant country. In 1794, Fitzherbert was informed by letter that her relationship with the prince was over. This then paved the way for the prince to marry his first cousin, the German Caroline of Brunswick. This was agreed with Parliament because Brunswick was a Protestant and so could produce a much needed Protestant heir. The government agreed that if George married her, they would write off his colossal debts. They were to the tune of £600,000. He was visibly repulsed by her appearance. He said her hygiene left a lot to be desired, and he was so shocked when he saw her for the first time, he asked for a large brandy. She said he was heavy and unpleasant, and nothing like his portraits. It was hardly the springboard for a happy union. On their wedding day, which was here at St James's Palace, the prince got so drunk he was held up during the service. And that night he was so hammered he spent the night on the floor in front of a fireplace, leaving his bride alone. Caroline later said she would have chosen death over reliving that day. They had relations no more than 3 times. A daughter was born, Princess Charlotte, but it was clear all was not well, and before long they were living apart. After their separation, Caroline travelled to Europe. Tragedy struck in 1817 when their only daughter died in childbirth at the age of 21. Caroline heard about it from a passing courier, as George had refused to write and tell her about it. Then, in 1820, George III died, and the regent now became King George IV. George and Caroline hadn't divorced, and so she was technically queen. The coronation of George IV on the 7th of August 1821 was hugely expensive and lavish, just as you would expect from the King of Bling. £238,000 was spent on it, tens of millions today. Then there was a scene of complete drama, because Caroline actually turned up at the Abbey, banged on numerous doors to get inside, because she was, after all, Queen of England. But she was refused entry. Crowds outside were in total support for her because they were already sick to death of George. When she was driven off, there were cries of "Shame, shame," as she disappeared through the streets of Westminster, completely spurned by the party inside the Abbey, enjoying the most lavish of coronations. Caroline of Brunswick would die little under 3 weeks after George IV's coronation. On her deathbed, she said that she'd been poisoned. That remains completely unproven. She was buried in Germany. On her coffin it said Caroline, Queen of England. George IV, he reigned for 9 years, all the way up until 1830, and we're definitely going to do more videos about him. Extraordinary stories. And I leave you with a little sketch of George IV. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.